At its best, our country stands for equality, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness, right? But somehow during election years, we overlook those strengths and focus solely, it seems, on our country's faults. But my next guest wants you to hold on to hope because, as he'll point out, election seasons have their upsides. And he'll remind us that at the core, America is good. I'm going to say it again. America is good. Host of KSL News Radio's Inside Sources, Boyd Matheson, joins me. How are you holding up, Mr. Everyone wants to talk to you right now, man?
We're very hopeful.
That's a good word. We'll probably say that a lot. I think right now people are mainly experiencing and seeing the polarization and the disagreements and the contention. But you say there are some positives to an election cycle, an election year that are worth noting.
Yeah, and it is actually this whole idea of being hopeful. I had an interesting conversation the other day, and you kind of have the optimists and the pessimists in the world, and we feel like we're kind of in the middle of that.
Sure.
And both the optimists and the pessimists are crazy. Like, they're not rational.
Yeah.
Because it's never going to be quite as good as the optimist thinks it's going to be, and it's never as fatal as the pessimist. So what we should be is hopeful, because hope is a virtue, and hope can be developed. And that's what we should be doing during an election cycle, is being hopeful, because it's a virtue and we can develop it together. The Constitution 237 years ago really gave us that path of what we choose together. It forces us to unify. Some people talk about it that this is part of the division and the divide, but if you look at it, it's we the people, so it's we, and what are we going to do? We're going to form a more perfect union. And what we choose to do together brings us together. And whether it's working side by side at a soup kitchen or digging a ditch or raking leaves for a neighbor, that's where we come together. And so in the midst of all the election cycle, if we're hopeful, if we're looking for what can we choose to do together in community, that should give us all a lot of hope.
Okay, personal question, my friend, because you are that, not just in your real life, but in all you say and teach and talk us through in terms of political conversation. How do you stay in that place? How do you stay in that middle ground? Do you have to ever reframe yourself?
Mostly I just need to look at people because you learn something from everyone. And I think one of the things we can do better in this election cycle is really assess, well, I wonder why she likes that particular candidate, or I wonder why he thinks that's a good policy choice to solve that particular problem. And when you start to do that and you stay radically curious, you ask great questions and follow-ups, then you get to a different conversation. You say, I get it now. I mean, I still may not agree with her, or I may not agree with him, but I understand how they got there. And then you start to value the dignity and even the divinity of the other people.
So stay curious, focus on people, and it keeps you in that middle value place of hope. You also point out the election season gives us a chance to not just get curious, but ask really smart questions, like to dig deeper on the question line than we might on a Monday through Friday.
Yeah, exactly. And really we can do that as we evaluate candidates for every office, whether it's the highest office in the land, the presidency, or a local mayor or city council person. This is actually a thing I learned in a very curious place. I was in Washington, D.C. I was at the Mexican-American Chamber of Commerce dinner.
Oh, wow.
And it began with a rabbi. So rabbi at a Mexican, I mean, it sounds like I said it for a joke, right? But this rabbi set me on a course because he gave us some lines that were great questions. He said, who is wise? He who learns from all people. Who is strong? He who conquers his negative inclination. Who's rich? Someone who's happy with what they have. Who's honorable? One who honors all mankind.
Oh, that's lovely.
And so think about that in the context of evaluating a candidate for a political office. You can say, okay, is this person wise? Well, do they learn from others, or is it their way or the highway? Do they ask good questions? Can they take input from all different points of the compass, or is it just them? Are they happy with what they're doing? Are they going to be happy governing or doing the job? Or are they going to be looking for the next job or more power or more fame or more position? So those are really good. Looking at who's strong, is it because it's about them? Or is it because they have that genuine humility in how they approach problems and how they approach people? And then ultimately, are they rich? Do they recognize that dignity and divinity in other people? Or do they see people that are homeless or dealing with addiction? Are they problems to be managed? Or are they human beings with infinite potential? Changes the framing of all. It's a great way to go through a candidate checklist.
Yeah, what a good exercise.
Really good questions.
I love that. I love that. It seems like I think I am going to pin it on this year being the year that we're almost starting to tiptoe away from the cliche. There are two things you don't talk about, politics and religion. It seems people are trying to disagree better. I'll use that phrase from Governor Cox, or at least have dialogue in a more respectful way. And that opens up this opportunity in an election cycle, in an election year, to get to know your neighbors a little bit differently and maybe be brave enough to have the respectful dialogue.
Yeah, and I'm one of those who thinks we should do it just the opposite. I think the two things we must talk about are politics and religion.
I like it.
Because if you really want to know someone, ask them what they believe in that space.
Yeah.
You'll get past the weather. You'll get past the sports scores.
When's garbage day?
When's garbage day? You'll get past all of that. And you'll actually start to learn about how they think and what they actually believe and feel. And you'll learn a ton. It's an amazing way to go about getting to know your neighbor a little bit better, to ask those kinds of questions and say, tell me about that. Why do you think that's the best way to go about that? Explain that for me. And so you can learn a lot about others. You also learn a lot about yourself in that whole process.
When you're forced to say it out loud, it's actually one of the blessings, if I can call it that, of a job like this. You're forced to articulate thoughts and feelings and opinions, and it's a worthy exercise to know thyself and to see thyself kind of in a verbal form.
Yeah, and so being able to do that with a neighbor or someone that you don't know, I always say every month you ought to either go to lunch or grab a soda or go for a walk with someone who looks different, thinks different, believes different, lives different, worships different than you. And then take time to verbalize, as you just said, because you don't really know what you feel until you express it that way. And then take some time to write it down, because you don't know what you really think about anything until you go through that process of actually putting it down on paper.
That's the cement scribe, is pen to paper.
Exactly.
And on the flip side of that, you touched on this, but another upside as we're punching home the positives of this election is you come to know yourself and know what you truly value. Like you're forced to put that into words, as we said.
Yeah, that's right. And really understanding that every election cycle is an opportunity to do a whole host of different things, whether it's expressing that you're unhappy with what's going on, or whether you're very satisfied, or you're just expressing something completely different. You'll often hear from the political pundit class or those that are in power that it's always a binary choice. It's this or this, or you have to choose between the lesser of two evils. That's what everyone wants you to believe, because that preserves the status quo for those who are already in power. And if we want to get past that, we have to be willing as voters to say, no, I am going to do different. I'm going to express myself in this vote.
Yes.
I'm not throwing it away. There is no such thing. The only vote that is ever thrown away is the one that is not cast. So we have to show up, we have to speak out, we have to cast the vote. But if you don't like what you see, and whether it's a city council or president of the United States, write an amen. That is an expression of what you believe, and that matters. And when enough people in the country say, I'm going to choose different, I'm not going to accept the fake fights and the false choice that are being served up, especially on national media or by two really big political parties that are in power. That's the beginning of change. And it will start in community. It will start with that conversation with your neighbor. It'll start with voting differently. Say, I'm going to make an expression with my vote. And so, no, I'm not going to vote for this or that because they're the two choices. I have lots of choices, and you can always write in a name, even if it's your own. I'd vote for you.
I'd vote for you. Don't write my name. Let's together decide just to put a VM on that ballot. Thank you so much. Bold words, bold challenges. And we're going to be listening to you and leaning on you this next month. You taking your vitamins?
Always.
Yes, you'll hear him all over KSL News Radio, most specifically 1 to 3 in the afternoons. So keep your dial there, and we'll focus on the hope that comes from conversations like this. Boyd, thank you.